The November 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Recreation Education Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairman Alcoffer,
Here.
Mr. Baines,
Here.
Ms. Boyce,
Here.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell,
Here.
and Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller,
He must be muted.
Mr. Chairperson, I'm sorry, I can't hear you at all. Let me see if I can.
Well, we can hear you.
Okay, there we go. My apologies. I should have you now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We will need to suspend the rules of the legislature for the purpose of prohibiting public in-person attendance. You have a non-debatable motion on your agenda, which needs a maker and a second. Motion by?
Move it, Mr. Chairman.
I second it.
And who was the second again?
Legislator Flagler Mitchell.
Okay. Thank you, legislator.
You're welcome.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
there is not, and none have been submitted.
Okay, thank you. I would now like to introduce Robert Franklin, Chief Financial Officer of Monroe County, who is here to present the 2022 proposed Monroe County budget as it pertains to the Recreation and Education Committee. We will have a question and answer period following the presentation. Mr. Franklin, thank you for attending this meeting. I will now open the floor to any committee members who have questions after your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I could do a check real quick, I have the welcome screen. And can you see me advance to the next slide?
I see the present slide up to the 2022 budget presentation to the Recreation Education Committee, but that's it.
Okay, and I picked the wrong option.
There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our 2022 budget presentation to the Recreation and Education Committee. As in prior years, the four areas relevant to the Rec and Ed include our Parks Department, Monroe Community College, our library system, and of course our authorized agencies. Looking at our Department of Parks, well, there's a lot going on within the various parks divisions, so I'm going to hit just a few of the bigger highlights. Within the administration division, cash capital funding of projects is being reduced by about $455,000. That specifically relates to one of their projects, utilities, access, and site improvements. A good portion of the work that would have been charged to that capital project will instead be charged to that bigger $7.2 million facilities renovation project that was authorized several months ago by the legislature. Also coming out of our administration division is the $180,000 mower lease. That had been moved back to our golf course division where it had been budgeted in prior years. Almost 75% of the appropriations within operations and support services relate to staff employment. So between the additional 3.5 FTEs that were added, regular step increases, of course, as I mentioned, the anticipated wage increase associated with our collective bargaining agreements, that's where we see the bulk of the overall appropriation increase. For our Seneca Park Zoo, again, we see payroll-related increases in appropriations, but because we have a new contractual relationships with the Zoo Society and now the SSA group, we increased appropriations for contractual services and supplies to account for expenditures that previously would have been made by the Zoo Society, but really need to be accounted for in our budget. Appropriations for recreation and education and for our golf courses are increasing by about $484,000. $180,000 of that relates to that golf course lease, which I mentioned has now come back from the administration division. The other appropriations within this area relate to our payroll and golf course maintenance, which has, there's been additional needs for golf course maintenance commensurate with the increase in the number of rounds of play. Parks revenues are budgeted to be about $650,000 lower than what was expected for the 21 adopted budget, but $500,000 of that reduction is because there's a lower amount of appropriated fund balance being used from our debt service fund. The remainder of the revenue reduction is strictly for conservative budgeting. Between our new contractual relationships at our zoo, and because so much of zoo attendance and the number of rounds of golf played are so weather dependent, I didn't want this year's success to go to our heads. Looking at Monroe Community College, support for students attending MCC and other community colleges in our state is increasing by a combined $1 million. Debt service related to MCC projects is coming down. It's about $761,000 lower. The overall decline in revenues you see on this slide reflects the reduced amount of appropriated fund balance used in 21 from our debt service fund. I'll also point out the 21 budget used $3.2 million specifically from our reserve for bonded debt. This year we're only using $171,000, so that's quite a reduction. Looking at slide 5, our library system support. See a modest increase in appropriations and a modest increase in library revenues. Take a look at the budget book, systems, but the impact of all that action on the numbers is almost negligible. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, I'll just look at our authorized agencies. Appropriations are relatively stable, coming up a little bit. The county is increasing support of its mid-sized arts organizations, supported by an increase in net county support and supported by a modest increase in our hotel tax revenue. Mr. Chairman, I do want to take hopefully just a few moments. There's been a lot of discussion at prior legislative meetings around County Law 224, which allows the legislature to appropriate optional appropriations. But under that law, there's really only 17 stated objects or purposes relevant to Monroe County. Really quickly, armistices and war memorials, commemoration programs of historical events of countywide interest, propagation of game and game birds and fish, and this is all about hunting and fishing, prevention of cruelty to children and animals, think SPCC and SPCA, the improvement of grounds and buildings of a county agricultural society, the administrative expenses for organizations providing services to those who are indigent blind, the elimination of noxious weeds, rodents, and wild animals, support and maintenance of the county's chapter of Cornell Cooperative Extension, provides funding for firefighter training schools, although Monroe County runs its own, support for legal aid societies, the maintenance and operation of a public museum, maintenance operation of a philharmonic orchestra, music festival, or a vocal, dance, drama, or performing arts organization, public television stations, but only those organized under Section 236 of the Education Law, and publicizing the advantages of the county, think tourism. Then rounding out this list are 3 items: support for Planned Parenthood associations, support for comprehensive area-wide health planning organizations, but only those formed pursuant to Public Health Law 89-749. And lastly, the maintenance operations of daycare coordinating councils. It really is a limited list, Mr. Chairman, and I just wanted to highlight this because it, contrary to some of the discussion that may have taken place, it's really not a mechanism for general county grant giving to agencies in our communities. But that is it, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my presentation. We're happy to field questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Franklin, for a very informative and educational presentation. I will now open it up to the rest of the legislators for questions or comments. Any members at all?
Give me just a moment here. I'll have a couple of questions. I just want to make sure that I'm
Legislator
adequate.
Keller, you have the floor.
Yes, just many of the questions were already answered. Thank you for that, Mr. Franklin. Salaries. One item on and through the chair on page 592 regarding the Seneca Park, temporary help is increasing 275,000 to 326,000 in 2022. You mentioned some of the services, contracts and supplies previously made by the Zoo Society being captured under these budgets. Is that related, or if not, what's the reason for that increase?
Thank you for that question. Mr. Chairman, on page 592, our Seneca Park Zoo salaries, it's not so much a result of the contractual relationships we have with the Zoo Society or the new organization, SSA Group. We did add 2 FTE positions to Seneca Park Zoo. There are the normal pay and step increases. This budget does account for the anticipated or estimate of the anticipated settlement of our CSEA contract. But equally important, this division, there's quite a number of lower paid county workers. So we had to also account for the county's adoption of a $15 per hour minimum wage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Let's see here. We got the capital leases, we already covered that. Page 696, revenues administration fund balance falls from 191,499 in 2021, yet is only at 6,393 in the proposed. Can you explain that, please, through the chair?
I'm sorry, are we on page 697?
696.
Oh, I'm sorry, 696.
Regarding a
Mr.
fund
Chairman,
balance.
Yes, I'm not seeing any fund balance on 696. Are we talking about Seneca Park Zoo?
Parks administration. I'm sorry, page 696. Okay, maybe I'm mistaken then.
That's okay, Mr. Chairman. I have Parks Administration revenues on page 695, but as the legislator stated, our fund balance is declining from 191,499 down to just $6,393. That specifically, Mr. Chairman, comes from our debt service fund. It's our reserve for bonded debt. For those who are not used to our reserve for bonded debt, when we borrow, issue bonds for a capital project, and at the project's conclusion, there are remaining unspent bonded dollars. Those bonded dollars must be transferred out of the capital fund into our reserve for bonded debt and can only be used for the future debt service on the capital project from which the dollars came. So we review our reserve for bonded debt each year, look at the upcoming debt service payments that have to be made. Last year, for particular parks capital funds, we had $191,000 available That money has been applied to the debt service made during this calendar year. So looking ahead into 22, we have only $6,393 remaining.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, then it would be a similar explanation then if we were to look at page 697, Seneca Park Zoo, the decrease in fund balance would be.
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Would
there's
be the
actually
bonded debt.
there's two actually items going on there. Our reserve for bonded debt, which is a slight reduction from 180 down to 168. But last year, we also issued a bond anticipation note to the tune of $302,000. That fund balance also comes from our debt service fund, but it comes from the unrestricted portion outside the reserve for bonded debt. That bond anticipation note has been paid off in full, and we did not issue a note this year that would need to be redeemed in 22. So that dollar amount goes away.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, legislator. Is there any other legislators that have questions regarding this proposed budget? I do have a couple of questions, if I may ask, and I think they're for educational purposes for me here. Through the chair, what percentage of the department's budget is mandated versus non-mandated, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to follow up on that. We didn't make that comparison in this budget book, so we didn't run those numbers. So I'm going to have to follow up with you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Franklin. What is the breakdown of the parks budget as it relates to appropriations charged to the general fund, the debt service fund, and capital projects fund?
Mr. Chairman, in this particular book, within our Department of Parks, there is nothing charged to a capital projects fund. The legislators would not see any expenses from a capital project fund. We don't manage the appropriations that way. The legislature approves the establishment and the authorization of the appropriations when it establishes either financing authority or cash capital transfers. The portion of our parks budget that is attributable to debt service is really in that line on the bottom of page 228, appropriated fund balance. Those dollar amounts specifically pertain to our debt service fund. It would require additional follow-up to differentiate. Well, you know, parks is all budgeted for in our general fund. So the appropriations you see in the budget book are for the parks in the general fund. Obviously, we account for items like health insurance in an internal services fund. That would have the gross appropriations, but they charge the general fund parks department for the staff residing in that organization.
Okay. Was that it, Mr. Franklin?
You know, Mr. Chairman, there is one more item. In addition to the appropriated fund balance that we use coming out of debt service, if you look at page 228 of the budget book, appropriations by object, you'll see a line for debt service. Debt service is entirely within our debt service fund.
Gotcha. Page 220, correct?
Page 228, Mr. Chairman.
228, okay, fine, thank you. Another question I had, Mr. Franklin, and again, does the 2022 proposed budget allocate any cash capital for county parks projects? And if so, why was the decision made to use cash capital instead of additional debt service?
Mr. Chairman, we do cash fund several capital projects within our Parks Department. There are, I believe, 4 of them. We use cash capital as a funding mechanism for certain capital projects that are annually recurring of equal or similar dollar amounts from year to year. And I find that is, for at least Monroe County, that is a good approach for us, as it avoids the associated interest and bond issuance costs. It's very quickly, if we have a capital fund of whatever dollar amount, say $1 million, that is authorized on an annual basis, it only takes, depending on the period of probable usefulness, 7, 8, or 9 years until the debt service outpaces what was otherwise authorized as simply a principal. So it's a good way for Monroe County to save a little bit of money in our budget by authorizing cash.
Mhm. Very good. That is all the questions I had. Any other legislator have any further questions?
Legislator Baines,
Legislator, go ahead. You have the floor.
I want to say to Budget Director Franklin, having been in on all 4 meetings tonight, I appreciate very much how deeply you've internalized and how coherently you can express that internalized understanding of a massive budget. The emphasis on not using bonding is something I deeply appreciate. And so I simply want to thank you and your department and wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you, legislator. I'd like to echo the same remarks. Mr. Franklin, thank you for a really excellent overview of these departments that we listened to this evening. Thank you for your presentation and your expertise in these areas. Much appreciated.
Yes, sir. Sir.
Is there anyone else who have any comments? Hearing none, the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the October 25th, 2021 minutes before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next item on the agenda is new business. Mr. Clerk.
21-063, amend resolution 144, 2011, as amended by resolution 313 of 2020 to extend the license agreement with the Lilac Festival, Inc. to produce the Lilac Festival Highland Park.
Okay.
So moved.
Second,
Who made that? Legislator Keller?
Legislator Baines made the
Hey,
motion.
I'm so sorry, legislator. So you made the
Keller
motion. Legislator Keller seconded it. Okay. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
through the chair of the administration, and perhaps this is maybe a bit of a comment. I don't know if you're in a position to answer this, but there were reports last year that a vendor exiting the Lilac Festival caused damage to a nearby Veterans Memorial. And speaking on behalf of the veterans community, just want to ensure that sacred ground is respected and that vendors are kept well clear of it, and that no additional damage occurs. Just a request, if you can speak to any steps, but if you cannot, just a request to make sure that there are steps in place to preserve and protect those memorials. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Keller. I share your same feelings, your same sentiment. I am liaison to the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 20. I am also a member of the Vietnam Chapter 20. I am well aware of the situation that occurred or has been occurring down there, especially when the festival is near the end. Vendors want to hurry out of there, and instead of taking the proper routes, the roads, they use the walking paths to exit the grounds. And we have 3 memorials there: War Ontario Memorial, Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and also the Gary Biker Memorial on the southeastern part of the park. So I'm proposing that the park department erect maybe snow fencing that would allow only pedestrian traffic and not vehicle traffic into or out of the park where the memorials are located. So, and I will pass that on to the director of the parks too. You know, and I'm sure he's well aware of the situations that occurred in the past there, you know, so we discuss them at our monthly meetings as well. So thank you, Mr. Keller, greatly appreciated. So, let's see. Next item on the agenda is new business. Mr. Clerk, we did that?
No, we got to vote. We gotta vote on
Oh,
this.
okay.
All those in favor?
Pardon me?
Yeah, ask who's in
Oh,
favor.
can we, let's see here. I'm losing my thought process here. All those in favor of saying, or signifying by saying aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Item carries. Next item, is there anything else? Okay. Are there any other matters to come before the committee? Hearing none, there be no other matters. November 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Recreation Education Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Recreation Education will be